That was one thing, is when I swapped to a Japanese company to an American company. When I swapped from a Japanese company to an American company, at a Japanese company, when you leave for the day, you're expected to like go to your senpais and your superiors. He is truly unstoppable. You're expected to go to your senpais and your superiors, and he was technically like my senpai, so I did this with him. Even if like I lived in his spare bedroom. But before you left for the day, you're expected to go to your senpais and superiors and say "Otsukare-sama desu," or no, not "Otsukare-sama." That's what they said back to you. Would say "Osaki ni shitsurei shimasu," because it's like rude that you're leaving before your superiors. And that was just like a thing, and we were like told that like pretty early on, like if like all of the Japanese folks at the company like knew it instinctively, but all the Americans, they're like, make sure to stop by the president's office and say "Osaki ni shitsurei shimasu" before you leave for the day, because that's like proper. I just got really used to that, and that was like part of my work life. Like if you left without saying it, it was really rude. But yeah, if you left without saying anything, it was considered really rude. And so when I swapped to an American company, I was not used to like that culture shift. And so my first day at my American job, I went to my direct supervisor, and I was like, who do I need to check out with for the day? And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, before I go home, who do I need to like say? And I was like, I'm not gonna say "Osaki ni shitsurei shimasu." It's like, I'm at an American company. I was like, who do I go to and say like, I'm leaving for the day, like, excuse me. And he was like, no one? He was like, why would you think you would need to do that? And I was like, Yeah, I was like, it was one of the most baffling things to me, because I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I have to check out with someone, that's how it works. Like, but then I would notice when I would walk by other people's offices, everyone's office was dark, and I was like, I didn't see anyone "Osaki ni shitsurei shimasu." And then I was like, oh my god, I don't have to do it. I can just leave. If it sucks, hit the bricks. But there were a couple things that were kind of like, I'm happy that I worked for a Japanese company for a while, because it was interesting and it gave me a lot of like interesting perspectives. But I definitely had to like break myself of a lot of stuff, because there's like, you don't have to "Osaki ni shitsurei shimasu" or "Otsukare-sama" to your coworkers. There was other things too that like Japanese companies sort of expected like a higher degree of like, they were like more weirdly involved in your personal life, which I hated. But like, and I think it's probably illegal, but they were sort of like, your car isn't nice enough, and it reflects badly on us if you like show up to the function in your crappy old truck. And I was like, I can't really do anything about that, but like, I was used to that sort of stuff. And so when I started at an American company, I was very self-conscious, because I was so used to like Japanese work culture, and I was like, I have to have my truck looking really nice, because it's going to be in the parking lot, and that's going to reflect on them and on me, and I need to like dress nicely and be sort of, and so my current coworkers say that like the first month or so that I was at they were like, we did not know what to make of you, because like you came from the video game industry, and we all knew that, and so we were like, oh, she's gonna be like pretty mellow and cool, and then you showed up and you were like very nervous and trying to keep everything really clean, being really proper, and that just like did not fit with sort of the impression that we got of you. And so then I like slowly learned to relax, and now I'm worried that if I ever went back to a Japanese company for whatever reason, that I would be like too far in the other direction now, because it took me a long time, but now I'm like I'm very casual. I'm I'm sort of the person that they like throw the new people at sometimes to like loosen them up, because they're as soon as they meet me, they're like, oh, I have nothing to worry about because this person is like such a catastrophe. Like, I can't possibly go farther than this. If you want me to have nice things to benefit the company, pay for it. I mean, that's where I got to at the end, which is why I was like, maybe I should just leave. Yeah, it's interesting. It's weird. And like, that's the thing is, even though I don't work in games anymore, I have a lot of friends that work in games still, and I like talking about like sort of the process of like getting a game released, because it's really interesting and it's really cool. But sometimes when it comes to like American companies, I feel a little bit more like I had friends at American companies, but I feel a little bit more blind because I was much more involved in like the Japanese side of game stuff, and so I feel like my perception is occasionally skewed. I mean, when it comes to like publishing, it's much more similar than I think like dev side, especially if you're like really involved with devs. It's like when we were talking about QA stuff in the Discord earlier this week, I was sort of getting the itch again. And that's the thing, is I still like help out on certain game projects sometimes if I have friends on them, because like you're never out, you know? When you it's like a chronic illness. You're in video games once and you're never allowed to leave. It's just, you like wake up and the siren song is calling you back and you're like, no, I can be strong. I can keep fighting. I'm not gonna fall back into my old habits. And then your friend is like, hey, wanna help me out with such and such on this project? And you're like, I'll do it for free. Kind of like the mob. Just when you thought you were out, they pull you back in. What games did you make or at least helped with? I will not say that because I don't want to dox myself. I have played, what I will say is I've played at least one game on stream that I've worked on. I think I've played more, but it was to like varying degrees. There was one game that I played that I was very involved in. And then there was one game that I played that I was less involved in, but still did work on. Super Seducer! Yeah, I'm the guy in the videos. No, I wish I worked on Sonic 06. Can you imagine that on my resume? I'm trying to think of stuff that I'm uncredited on, because that's obviously the easiest. I won't say like the names of stuff because I don't even want to be connected, but like stuff that I'm uncredited on. I did some stuff for a shmup that came out in the past few years. Uncredited in Horizon Forbidden West. Okay, so that's the thing, is Kuriko actually knows some of the stuff that I've worked on, because in a fit of like, I want to see what happens here, I dumped a bunch of lore on her to see her reaction. Uncredited in Horizon Forbidden West. Yeah, I wish I worked on Horizon Forbidden West. Then the fact that I predicted the entire game would actually make logical sense. Can you imagine that on my resume? Haha, yeah, I can't imagine having a reviled game on a resume. Yeah, Horace, I think I've said this before, but Horace is also a video game person. We met in the industry. And he was involved in one of the most reviled games of the last decade. And I bring it up at any given opportunity. I wasn't involved. Just him. Woohoo! finished it. Yeah, basically anytime Horace is like, could you stop sending me? Can you stop sending me all this wretched stuff you find online? I'm like, well, I wasn't the one who was involved in blah, blah, blah. I simply will say no. For legal reasons, we can't say. Did you taste the rainbow? Unfortunately. Oh, yeah, I told Kuriko. I told Kuriko because Kuriko was reading to me when I had to restart a stream, a collab one time, and she was like reading to me what the chat was saying while I was trying to fix my setup, and she was like, Horace wants to know if you checked such and such, and I said, yeah, bitch. Of course I did. And then I was like, sorry, that's just how I talk to people. And also, I'm allowed to say that because he worked on such and such. Yeah, the stuff I've done most recently, I've mostly been on like the outskirts of things, just like helping with more minor stuff. But yeah, I did work for a shmup that came out in the last few years, and I did work on 2 games that won stuff at the last Game Awards. But the stuff that I did on the games that won at the Game Awards is more like, it was much less involved than I've been on like past projects. It was after I left. But yeah, just like talking about like QA stuff got me all fired up. But that's sort of the thing, is I feel like once you've seen how the sausage is made, you just want to talk to people about how the sausage is made. Because there's so many like misconceptions about just like the process of doing stuff, and I feel like I feel like that's the thing with QA is I've always heard when I talk to people about like, oh, you know, this came out and this came out and whatever, and people's response is basically like, oh, that must have been really fun for all of the people who got like paid to just play that game and test it all day in the comfort of your office. But that's not really how it ever works. Like, I occasionally did testing. I was not a tester. I was not even in that department. But I occasionally did testing just because I was like, I don't really trust the process that we're going through for testing this particular game, and there's certain things I'm worried about, and so I'm gonna stress test it in a few different ways. Because it's gonna be on my head if it comes out broken. But that's the thing, is like, that was kind of rare that I did that. I only did that on like 1 or 2 games. And for the most part, a lot of games and a lot of companies, it's really rare to have QA in-house. And there's quite a few QA houses now. I'm trying to think of some of them. I know a big one is like Pull to Win, and I don't know where they're based. And I know that there's like a California-based one, Digital Hearts. So that's the thing, is you see like a lot of, in credits for games, a lot of the time you actually see like the name of the QA house, and then sometimes it'll actually list the testers. But in a lot of cases, those testers are actually from the QA house. They don't even work for the company proper. And a lot of times there are contractors as well. They're not even like full-time employees with benefits or anything. Pull to Win's name always irked me because I don't know what it means. I assumed because they have a really close relationship with Nintendo, I assumed that it meant like the pull at the end of the Mario stage. That was my assumption. I've had the same thought before. I've been like, what the hell does that mean? But I've only ever worked with them once. I mostly worked with other QA houses. So I don't have like a ton of experience with them personally. But I always assumed it was the pull at the end of the level. Because I think I usually see them in Nintendo credits, so I thought that they had like a pretty close relationship, but I could be wrong. I don't have the deets. That would make sense, thank you. I'm shocked I'm making any sense at all right now. Where's the shadow? It's off the screen right now. And it got replenished because I accidentally mixed the Kraken in with the Grenadine for the Rainbow Road, and I didn't want to mess up the Rainbow Road prematurely. I wanted to mess it up right at the very end when I had already achieved so much. So I poured that into the shadow. So now the shadow is sort of replenished looking, so I'm a little afraid to... I feel like it's gonna smite my ruin upon the mountainside, and then darkness will take me. I'll live the lives of 300 men and... You good? Yeah, I'm quoting Gandalf. Of course I'm good, please. I'm trying to think of like other game-related stuff that's like kind of interesting. It's hard to like share. It's hard to share certain things because I'm like, oh, like that's so specific. It's like an easy doc, so I'm trying to dance, but like another thing that one thing I don't miss about being in games is that a lot of people, depending on like what games you work on, you tend to get people who have like a vendetta like against, not you personally, because they don't know that like you're working on it, but like a vendetta against like your game, or your series or your company or whatever. And like on Twitter, that's whatever. Like that stuff never really bothered me. I'm not the type to like name search. And so I was never affected when people would get like spicy about certain things. But you occasionally get like a game journalist or like a what's the word? An outlet who sort of like has it out for one thing or another, or they like just decide that there's a story somewhere when there's not. And so there was like actually one instance where a really, really well-known game journalist, don't you call out Jeff? No, from everything I heard, Jeff is an angel. Like everyone who I've ever met who like knew him personally was like, he's the nicest person I've ever met. I would die for him. And I was like, oh. I'm like, well, here's my phone, where he's my phone background taking a shot of Mountain Dew. Actually, I need to find that picture now. But like I had one instance, so I did work with a game dev who was like pretty well, he had like a reputation. He had a reputation for like a very like specific like approach, and so like people sort of memed him sometimes, and like not everybody liked him, but basically anyone who liked him knew that he was like a really good dude and like just a nice guy and just solid all around. And so like those of us who sort of like, you know, were involved were like, this dude rules, like leave this man alone. But one time I was sort of dealing with like some of the, it wasn't like my job per se, I just happened to be on the project and it sort of came to me. I was dealing with like one really, really persistent, really well-known game journalist. So of course you see like this big name that you know, like come into your inbox and you're like, oh sweet, he wants to interview my guy. But then like you read the questions and you're like, oh, he's digging. Like he wants a very specific, like the questions were like super specific and super leading, and we're like clearly digging for a specific response to like write like a really like scathing clickbait piece basically. And so I basically like, I told him that I was like, I think this guy's like trying to sort of get you, and I was like, I don't have a good feeling about this, but you know, you should still answer the questions. You should still do the interview. Like it's I think you're smart enough to you know, answer in a way that doesn't sort of give him what he wants. And he did, like, he had really good answers to all of the really, like, leading questions. He was just very honest, but, like, he was really authentic, but, like, not like, you know, he was smart. He, like, he knew how to phrase things in ways that didn't sound bad. But so I sent off his responses to the game journalist, and the dude came back with essentially the exact same list of interview questions, but they were all slightly tweaked to be even more leading to get the exact answer he wanted, and I was like, bro, we're done here. I was like, the man gave you an interview. This is ridiculous. And that's the thing is, like, there's so many people who have, like, really, like, big names in the game industry, and people are like, oh, like, they're so prolific, or whatever. But then, like, when you're in games and you're kind of a nobody, which, like, I'm not saying is, like, a negative thing. Like, I loved being a nobody. When you're in games and you're kind of a nobody and you're dealing with those people on a regular basis, and you're like, oh my god, all of these people that are, like, super famous and everybody talks about all the time are kind of shitty. It's like, I don't know, it's very jarring. Maple hates transparency. Yeah, I was like, you're clearly just trying to bait this guy. It's like, why do it? It's not, you want a soundbite. Well, that's the thing is, I've also met heroes who are super nice. So, like, I've never met him in person, like I said, but, like, everyone who I worked with who knew Jeff Keighley personally was like, he is the nicest man alive, and, like, he's just the best. So, like, there's it's not like, oh, everyone is garbage in games, or, like, there's a ton of really nice people. And there's a bunch of, like, really big name devs who I just, like, happen to, like, work with who are just really nice people. And, like, they just want to, like, tell you about how much they love their wives and their kids, and, like, they're just really chill and nice, and they just really love games. But then, like, it's sort of once in a while you run into, like, the one person who's like, oh god! Or you, like, hear stories like, never, you know, be alone with so-and-so, and you're like, what? Excuse me? So it's really weird, because, like, yeah, sometimes you meet people who, like, you've heard of because you like their work, and they just turn out to be just very chill and down to earth and amazing, and then other times you meet them and you're like, I would, like, I don't ever, how do I stop? How do I make sure we never have another conversation ever again? I'm trying to think of people who I've, like, met who are really cool. I didn't spend a lot of time with him, but I did meet Suda one time for something, and he said he liked my shoes. So I don't know much about him beyond that, because, like I said, we met once, but he liked my shoes. I have met I have spent, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I'm familiar with Swery, and he's an angel, and I would die for him. If anyone has anything mean to say about Swery, I'll fight you in the street. I obviously wouldn't talk about people who I met who were, like, garbage on here, because I would have to kill the bot immediately. But there's, like, that's the thing, is it's not like a don't meet your heroes, because honestly, like, I met so many people. Sorry, I'm drunk. I'm just, like, full of my game feelings right now. But I met so many people who are, like, really just, like, nice people, who are really genuine, and, like, they were just nice, and they, like, cared about the people around them, and they cared about the work they were doing. And they were just good people. And so, like, and they're so, like, not everyone who has, like, a big following is bad or anything like that. Like, a lot of them are honestly just really, like, amazing artists. But that's the thing, it's like occasionally you get like, you come across one person and you're like, oh yeah, I've seen you around Twitter, everyone retweets you all the time, you have a zillion followers, oh yeah, and then you meet them and you're like, oh my god. Like, how do I make sure we're never in a room together ever again? I'm trying to think of who else I've met who's been. Do you guys know Patrick Seitz? He's a voice actor. He's done a lot of stuff. I always immediately like think of him with Ragna from Blaze Blue, because even though I know he's been in a million things, and he's been in a million games and a million anime, I just always think of him as Ragna for some reason, because I think that I used to play Blaze Blue a lot, and so that just sort of stuck in my head. He's the nicest! Yeah! He's just a huge sweetie. I tried to shake his hand when I met him because I was like, oh yeah, you're Patrick Seitz, like, I want to shake your hand. And I accidentally stretched my arm too far because I was nervous and being awkward, so instead I grasped his arm like a weird gladiator handshake, and we just stared at each other, and he was like, I respect the gladiator handshake, and I was like, please please don't remember this. Please forget this the second you leave. Homie definitely thinks about it at 3 a.m. once a year, like, that was one hell of a handshake. That's what I worry about. I'm always like, oh my god, if we ever meet again, he's gonna be like, you're the weird girl who gave me the gladiator handshake, and then I will just incinerate in front of him. But like when you're doing like dev on a game and you have like dev builds, and usually when you're like capturing footage for like manuals or metadata, or ESRB stuff, you tend to use dev builds, and to run dev builds you have to, oh, there's a giant moth at the window. Ooh. You have like a special dev console that you actually get like from the company. So like Sony gives you like a development PS4. And that it's like it's specially equipped to run like certain types of builds, rather than like retail builds. And so the dev consoles are pretty important because like you you need them for a lot of your work if you're doing production side stuff. But there was one day where we only had the build of a game that I was doing some stuff for installed on one particular console. And one of my coworkers had actually taken it home because he was doing some like after hours work and some testing on it. And then he forgot to drop it off at the office the next morning before he had to go to the studio where they were doing voiceover stuff. And so he had the dev I think it was a PS4. He had the dev PS4 like in his car. And I was like, where's the dev PS4? Like, I need this to do my work today. And so I knew he was the one who had it last, and I was like, yo, where's the dev PS4 at? And he was like, oh god. He was like, I have the one that has the build that you're looking for. It's in my car. He was like, I'm like 45 minutes away if you want to drive over here and get it. And I was like, yeah, I kind of need it. I'll come over. And so I drove over to the studio where they were doing voice recording stuff to get the PS4 for my coworker. And I was just gonna do like an exchange in the parking lot because I was like, I don't really have time to like hang out. But then he was like, oh, come inside. And he knew he knew that I was like a big like Silent Hill, Tales of, and Xenosaga fan. And so he was like, oh, you should come inside. Like, just come in for a quick second. Like, just, meet everybody, say hi, be polite, be a person. And I was like, okay. So I came in, I was like, bro, I need the PS4. And I walked into, like, an older gentleman in the hallway. And it was a really, like, narrow hallway, so we sort of had to, like, like sort of schmoove around each other. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, like, excuse me. And he was like, oh, no problem at all. And the second he spoke, I was like, that's Jade from Tales of the Abyss. That's Captain Matthews from Xenosaga. That's Harry from Silent Hill Shattered Memories. And I just froze and stared at him. I was like, and he just looked at me. And I was like, are you Kirk Thornton? And he was like, yes. And I went, ugh. And he was like, I've never gotten that reaction before in my life. And he was like, wait, he was like, what role do you like? And I just was like, I was just like in like blue screen of death mode in my brain. And I was like, I love you as Harry Mason in Silent Hill Shattered Memories. And he was like, oh yeah, he was like, that was a pretty short role actually. And I was like, but I still love it. And he was like, well, nice to meet you. And walked off. I guess he was there for something related to what we were doing, and I was just like, ah! You literally met Shadow the Hedgehog? I know! I didn't know he was Shadow until later, because I wasn't a Sonic boy. I just heard Harry Mason speak to me and imploded on the spot. That's the problem, is I get like, I try not to be a fangirl. That's one thing, is if you're like a huge fangirl, and like you run into people who do work that you like, you sort of have to learn to tamp it down because they're like, I'm working right now. And like, I don't need like a fan screaming at me. But like, if you're blindsided by it, sometimes it just comes out. And that would always happen to me. Like, I would run into like that situation where I was like, Harry Mason, just talk to me. Jade Curtis, just talk to me. And so that always becomes sort of like a situation. I feel like I've gotten a lot better at it over the years. Early on, I was always very like I feel like people could tell I just froze up instantly because I was like, oh god, I love them. Most voice actors are massive dweebs too. That's true. That's true. I actually, one of my favorite like memories. So I didn't really like working events very much. Not because like I like events, so that's the thing, is like I love cons, and like I love going to PAX and I love going to Otakon and stuff like that, but I don't like working events like E3 or GameStop Expo or anything like that, because it just becomes a lot, and also people tend to be like really rude to people who are working booths. That's why I always try to be like extra polite to booth workers, because I'm like, I know what this is like. So I've had people be like really weird and horrible to me. And I was actually working an event, and sort of our flagship title at the time was like the big display at our booth. And I had already sort of been fighting off people throughout the day to that point. I had a bunch of people who just had really weird energy in a row. Either they like didn't believe that I actually worked for the company for some reason. They're like, how did you get, like, are you like an agency person or are you somebody's friend? And I was like, no, I fucking work here. We fucking go to school here. I was like, I work here. And they're like, oh, how did you get this job? And I was like, I applied. And like my boss like put his hand on my shoulder and was like, be nice. And then I had somebody who accused me of mapping the main menu to the touchpad instead of the options button, and I was like, my brother in Christ, I have no control over that. So I just had like a bunch of people being weird to me all day, so I was kind of in a mood, and I was just like trying to like get through the rest of the day. And then these three weirdos came up to my booth. I'm like standing there like at the main desk, sort of fielding people, and these three weirdos come up and they were just yelling about the game that we were showcasing, and they were like, I heard this is an amazing game, it's the most perfect game ever, they couldn't have done better. And I was like, I mean, I appreciate the praise, but I don't understand what's happening here. And then they all started yelling about how amazing the voice acting was. And they just like looked at me and I looked at them and I was like, wait, are you guys voice actors in this? And they were like, yeah! And I was like, oh my god, you're all dorks. Yeah, part of the reason that I like, that I just like following voice actors is because I just know that a lot of them are just huge dweebs. They all just like, they're fans of the stuff that they work on, and they're just like, Godspeed, dudes. Yeah, well, they came up and they were like, I heard the voice acting in this is amazing. There's never been a voice acting cast like it. All of these voice actors should earn awards. And I was like, you guys are voice actors, aren't you? But there are some voice actors, it's really interesting. There are some voice actors who are like more low-key. Like, there's some voice actors who are very like hip with the culture, and you like see them on Twitter like tweeting about their games, and they're fans of a bunch of stuff and all that, and they're huge nerds. Were they right? No, they did a great job. They did a great job. They were very good. But yeah, you sort of like, you have a bunch of voice actors who are like hip with the culture, who are like streamers or whatever, like they're very with it. But then you sort of have this other subset of voice actors who are like not at all hip with like sort of the culture of the games and the anime that they're doing voice acting for. Like, they're just like, I love acting and my voice is good and I'm a good voice actor and like I'm just gonna, you know, do this and then go do my thing. And they just have like no idea what's going on outside of that. Like they'll like look at their Twitter and they'll be like, wow, people really liked that. And then but other than that, like they just have like big sort of dad energy, slash mom energy. And so I actually worked with a voice actor like that once. He was really, really nice. Huge dad energy. But he also sang in a cover band as like, sort of, that was like his passion. And we always wanted to like give copies of the game to the voice actors who worked on it just so that they like had it. And usually we could mail it to them, but he was like, oh, just like drop it off in person with me. When we asked for his address, he was like, oh, I'm gonna be at like this bar on this day with my cover band and we're gonna be playing a set, just drop it off with me then. And I was like, sure. I was like, I'll go. Like, I want to check out this bar. I want to see this guy's cover band. And so I went, and and the game that I was giving him, I think it was for PS3 or PS4, I don't remember. It was one of those. And so I showed up at the bar where he was playing with his cover band, and I was waiting for them to have a break, and they finally had a break, and I rolled up and I was like, hey dude, like, great show, thank you so much for your hard work, here's your game. And I handed him the game, and he just like walks back up to the mic, like mid-break, calls the attention of everyone in the bar, and he was like, everybody check out this game I was in. It was incredible. Like, you have to play. He was like, buy it on your PlayStations. And I was like, I have to get out of here. I was like, I'm actually gonna explode in a crowd full of people if he says, buy it for your PlayStations one more time. Honestly, just like, it's just really fun, like, just talking to voice actors, because a lot of them tend to just be like either huge nerds or like just incomparable dad energy. There was one girl who I was like a really big fan of, I don't wanna say her name just because I don't want to dox myself, but there's a girl who I was a really, really, really big fan of. Like, I just love her voice more than anything. Like, I could listen to her voice all day. And, but she really wasn't getting, like, any bigger roles. Like, she was just getting really small roles, even though her voice was amazing. And so I just, like, pushed to, like, cast her as, like, a bunch of, like, bigger roles and projects that I had, like, leverage over or that I was involved in. I was like, please, like, she's so good. Like, every time I hear her voice, like, it's just like the heavens open up. Like, you need to cast her in, like, as, like, in whatever you can. And I actually got her cast as, like, a lead in a couple games. But I would, like, never go to her, like they would offer, they would be like, we know you're a huge fan of hers, do you want to, like, come to her session and hear her do, like, recording on some of the stuff? You're the one who, like, cast her for this role. And I was like, no, I'm fine. I'll make a fool of myself. I was like, don't let me be in the same room. Just let her work. I'll listen to the files afterwards. I don't want to be there. You gotta support your, you have to support your Oshis in every venue you can, you know? She was definitely my VA Oshi. So I was like, you have to cast her. She has to be the lead in this game, but never let me meet her because I will make a fool of myself instantly. And they were like, understood. They were like, okay. Well, you can come on the other recording days. I was like, thank you. And I don't mean to, like, get, like, preachy or whatever, but, like, there were certain people who I met in games who were, like, way more, what's the word? They were, like, really vocal about their involvement in certain things, even if they weren't that involved. They would, like, they were just loud. They were like, they would do the most minor work for something. If they did any work at all, frankly. Like, they could be on, like, the periphery of a project, and they would be so loud on, like, Twitter about their involvement in it. And they would get all of this, like, credit on social media for, like, oh, so-and-so was so involved in such and such. Like it's so, like, what's the word? Like, they're such a champion of game dev, and they're such a champion of video games because they were so involved in such and such. But, like, sometimes the people who are the loudest are not the most involved. And so that always really pissed me off because, like, to me, like, making video games was a team sport. It's not a zero-sum game. Like, me getting credit for, like, helping on something does not diminish, like somebody else probably did more work than me, and they should be credited for that, and everyone should praise them. Like, I shouldn't, like just because I did something doesn't mean, like, it was my sole effort, you know? Games are a team, unless it's, like, an indie game made by, like, one or two people. A lot of bigger games are a huge team sport. That's the thing. It's not made by one person, even if there's a Hideo Kojima behind a game or whatever. Like, it's made by a zillion people. And that was something that that was, like, one of the things I actually liked about games, and working in games, is because I always felt really close with my coworkers because we were all working on the same thing, and we all had the same goal, and we usually had the same, like, vision in mind. And whenever, you know, they had a really big success, it was really exciting. And whenever, like, and some of them, like, and like, game companies are like, there's a lot of really cool people there. And so there were, like, people who were dads, and there were people who were, like, new college graduates. But when you see their project do well and you see them get credit, it's really exciting because you're like, oh my god, like we made this thing together and it's really exciting for them and people love like this particular thing that they worked on in it, and that's really cool for them. And so it always makes me kind of like irritated when I see people like sort of put all of the credit for a game onto one person, or say like, oh, so-and-so is the reason that like this game is like as good as it is or whatever, because that's almost never true. It's like almost never true. I'm sure that there are a few instances where that's true, but like games with large teams are like, there's so many unsung people on all of those projects. And so that always like made me really irritated when I saw people make a big deal out of like their involvement, because it's fine to be like excited that you were involved in something that you love. Like that's one thing. But it's another to sort of make yourself like the patron saint of that thing. And so that's the thing, is whenever people were like, oh, like you should tell so-and-so that you did such and such, or you should like, you know, you should tell this voice actor that you cast them, or you should like, I never wanted to do anything like that because I was like, no, like even if like I was part of the decision-making process, like it was a team sport, and like they, you know, they wouldn't have even had that role if it weren't for the people who wrote the game. They wouldn't have that role if it weren't for the people who coded the game. Like it's not like, it's not, that's one of my biggest pet peeves, and those types of people were like the reason why I left the industry. I mean, the working conditions notwithstanding, the working conditions were not good. It's important to love the art in yourself more than yourself in the art. Yeah! See, that's the thing, is like whenever I saw a game that I worked on, I would find like the one or two things that like were my big contributions, and I would like, oh my god, I'm so proud of this. But I wasn't like, this game happened because of me. You know? Like, and that was always like my big pet peeve, is in games there's a lot of people with a lot of ego. Which, like, I get it. Like, you're making something that a lot of people are a big fan of, and it's easy for it to go to your head. But, like, I was never under the impression that I was making anything more than, like, something that people could enjoy. Hell yeah, I tested those jiggle physics! I wish. But, like, I mean, like, whatchamacallit? The working conditions in games don't tend to be good, because you have a lot of crunch, and you're pretty underpaid, depending on your position, but a lot of people tend to be underpaid. And you have really long hours, and like leading up to release, things tend to go really crazy, and you're just never home, and you're not sleeping enough, and you're working on the weekends, and like I hated all of that. Like that sucked. Don't get me wrong. I was like, I want a life where I can, you know, go out on the weekend. I can go visit my friends and not feel guilty that I'm not working. I want a life where I can play a video game and not stare at the text, at the kerning in the text, and be like, wait, how did they decide to do that? Like, I was like, I want to be able to enjoy games in their purest form again, without worrying that, like, without having to align it with my vision of working. Like, I want them to be separate, and that was a lot of the reason why I left, because games have always been like the thing that I'm most passionate about. And so it just felt wrong to have this thing that I was grinding away on for 80 hours a week sort of killing my passion for how much I loved games. So I was like, oh, like, I kind of want to just do something that has nothing to do with my passions so that I can just, when I am doing my passions, I can just really like devote myself to them and not have work in my head. So that was part of it, and the working conditions were part of it. But there's also just like a lot of people who are just like really crappy. And I think in like every industry there's a lot of crappy people, but because of the nature of like video games and like fandom and stuff like that, it feels like a lot of the crappy people in video games tend to get like a following. And they tend to, even if it's unearned, they tend to get a bunch of people who just like will be there. Basically, they're Twitter warriors for them. Like if you know, something goes wrong with a game that they worked on, or if somebody says that they're not correct about something, or whatever, and that just like really bothered me, because like I worked on a lot of the same stuff, and I've never been, I'm trying to think of a good way to say this. The whole reason I wanted to become a VTuber is because I was like, you know, like I'm kind of a private person, and like I'm not comfortable with being like super public about like me and my work and stuff like that, but like at the same time, so it didn't bother me in the sense where I was like, well, those should be my followers and they should be praising me. I was just more like, why are you all heaping this praise on this person who did like one thing, and it was like one really small thing, and like you're heaping like all of the praise for this game on one person who just happens to be louder than everyone else on the project, and you're like ignoring all of the people who like poured their blood, sweat, and tears into it, and like just, oh, so it's so-and-so's like project of passion or whatever, and that really bothered me. Like I felt like the cult of personality in video games was so strong. And it was so strong all the time about like everything. Like I felt like every game had like one or two devs that everyone was like, that's the person. And it was like, it's not. Like, you know, they did work and they should be praised for their work, but you know, they aren't the game. They didn't make the whole game. Like a bunch of people made the whole game. And that like mentality really bothered me. And for as much like crap as my current career currently puts me through, that's never been an issue. Like there's no pride of ownership. There's no like rock stars or whatever. It's just like everyone is working for something and nobody gets like credit over anyone else, you know? And so that really bothered me about games, and that was another part of the reason I wanted to leave, because I was like, I don't want to be involved in this. I was like the person who I'm watching getting like all of like the Twitter cred for doing like 5 minutes of work on a game, and they're getting more credit than like the father of multiple children who I've watched like work overtime while trying to take care of his family, and like they're also giving him a hard time because they're just dumping more work on him and then they're getting the credit for it. I was like, that's ridiculous, and I hate it. And I don't want to be involved in this anymore. True family moose. Well, like, that's the thing, is I worked with a lot of dads, and they were always the ones who worked really hard, and they worked too late, and they were like, I'm so sorry, my kid is sick. I have to go pick him up from daycare, and then I will come back here and do more work. And I was like, bitch, go take care of your kid. What the fuck? Like, you're a dad. It's okay. But they were always the ones who like busted their ass really hard, and they were always the ones who didn't want to like speak up and like get credit and take credit for anything, because they were like, it's my job. And they were just very like pragmatic about it, but at the same time I just thought it was really unfair, because I was like, they're sacrificing a lot and working really hard, and you know, other people who just happen to be louder can just get all of the credit. And sort of an interesting thing that I've noticed since leaving the industry is that like I met a lot of those types of people who were just really loud. But like you meet, I met a lot of people who are really loud, and I met a lot of people who are really kind of self-centered about their work. For as many Twitter followers as they get, and as many people as are like always ascribing the success of a video game at the feet of like one or two people who are on the project or whatever, everyone in the industry knows. Like, we all know who the shitters are. And so like I've seen these people get sort of like passed around between projects because everyone is like, oh my god, this motherfucker. But like at the same time, everyone's too afraid to say anything on Twitter because you don't want to get yelled at by a bunch of strangers. But since I left, I've sort of seen like the people who I dealt with on a lot of projects who are like that sort of get passed around between a lot of projects. And when I've talked to people from those projects, I'm like, yeah, what happened there? Like, why'd they get moved? And they're like, they were the worst. They were just horrible to the people that they worked with, and then they would go on Twitter and be like, it was all me, I did everything. And so they were like, we just didn't want to work with them. And I was like, great. Well, I'm glad that there's like, so like, I guess there's like some justice on the back end, even if like there's no justice in the public sphere, I guess, is the way to think about it, or the way I think about it, at least. I'd rather be well regarded by others in my industry than well known by the public. I agree. I like, alas, neither of these things will happen after the game I worked on. No, I agree. Like, that's the thing is, I was like, we're making fucking video games. Like, don't get me wrong, I love video games, but we're making video games. We're not saving people's lives here. I mean, like, people really love video games, and it's an important part of a lot of people's lives, but we're not like inventing a cure to like a disease. Like, we're making video games, and it's important to just know that and have that perspective, because then you don't get like a huge head about it. After I left, I've stayed friends with a lot of my coworkers. Like, we still talk. We still like hang out. Like Struggle-chan, who came over last week. Like, she was my old coworker. We used to work together, and we're still really close. So like, that's the thing, is that was what was important to me. I was like, oh, everyone I worked with like seems to like have a good opinion of me, so that's what matters to me, and I'm happy. Even if like I'm not like huge in the public sphere or whatever, like if I made their lives easier over the course of our project, that makes me happy. So there was one E3 where I had finally like worked my way up the ladder and up like the importance. I found my place enough that I was actually invited to one of the in-person E3 conferences, specifically the Sony conference. And like, it's actually like kind of, if you're not a journalist, it's kind of hard to get an invite to the in-person conferences, because like everybody wants to be there. Everybody wants to be there for like the next big thing. And so I actually got an invite to, are you about to talk about seeing Miyamoto with the donuts and lemonade again? No, but that was also very traumatic. So I got an invite to the Sony conference, and I was really proud of myself because I was like, okay, I've made it. Like, Sony noticed me, they want me to be there, they want me to be in the crowd, like, that's really exciting, I'm big enough at my company to like get this invite. And so I was very proud of myself. Good night, Edgy. I was really proud of myself, and I was really excited to go. And I was like all like prepared to go. I was all like dressed up and everything. And then there was a last minute issue on one of our builds. Because obviously it's E3 time, and we had a booth, and like the build was at the booth and everything. There was a last minute issue in a build, and we had to have somebody fix it, but then I was the one who had to update the builds on the development consoles. And so that it would all like run properly at the booth. And so like I had done a lot of work already. Like I had been there like basically until 11 p.m. every day for like the past like 2 or 3 weeks. And I was like, please. And so I asked somebody else at the office, and I never asked anyone to do any of my work for me because that's not like in my code. I was just like, I finally gave in because I wanted to go to the Sony conference so badly because I finally got an invite. And I was like, can you please update the builds for me? Like, I really want to go to this conference and it's really important to me. And this person who I asked, who was the only other person in the office who could do it, said no, that they were too busy and they couldn't update the builds for me. And so I missed the conference so that I could stay in the office and update all of the builds. And it was the Sony conference where they announced Final Fantasy VII Remake and Shenmue 3. And what was the other big thing? There was 3 big announcements that year. It was like the big Sony conference of like all time. And when I came out, so I'm like so I feel like every game office has like a cave. Like they have sort of the cave for like the dev consoles. So I was in the dev console cave like updating stuff. And I came out to like check something. And I walked by their desk and I noticed that they weren't doing any work. They were just tweeting about stuff that they hadn't worked on. And I was like, you know what? That was like step 1 to me deciding I'm done. Oh, The Last Guardian. Yeah. I was like, you couldn't even update these freaking builds for me, and you're sitting here trying to farm clout while I'm updating the builds on all these consoles for our E3 booth. And I'm missing the Final Fantasy VII Remake reveal. I had to get a ride home that night because during E3 week I didn't usually drive to the office because we would head to the convention center. We would head to the convention center to update or to fix up our booth and stuff like that. And since we would all drive together, it was like, we don't want to have all these cars here. So I had to get a ride home that night from somebody else because I didn't drive to the office that day, and I like cried the entire way home because I was so upset about missing the conference. And I was like, never again. And I'll make sure that nobody else goes through this ever again. So like when like pretty much from then on out, I was just like, I was kind of like, no, this is wrong. You're wrong. And yeah, I mean, I don't regret leaving choose violence. I don't regret leaving video games for a lot of reasons, but not having to deal with people who think that they're like above you because a bunch of random people on Twitter think that they work on a game that they don't work on is one of the things I miss the least. I finished it. It's done. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I have a lot of opinions about the game industry, but my number 1 opinion is that unless it's an indie game made by 1 or 2 people, it is a team sport. It is a team sport, and you gotta treat everybody on your team right, and you know, you're not the one who made the whole thing. You're just some rando who's like one part of the project, which is fine. I think that the fact that we can make these really cool like experiences and these games that a lot of people love and it's a collaboration between like hundreds of people, I think that that's really cool. I think that alone is dope. And so I'm sort of like, why try and make yourself like the shining beacon of a game or a series when it's way cooler that 200 people managed to work together to make something that rules? That's just my opinion, though. Like, I love seeing projects come out. When I got like a game in a case, like in like actual like retail packaging in my hand, it was like the most amazing feeling in the world. Like, oh, I worked on this. Like, oh, like this is fresh off the press, and like this is really cool that, you know, we all came together and made this. Like, that was always amazing. But at the same time, you have to like look at yourself and be like, is making what's essentially a fun toy, you know, worth seeing people act so toxic? And for me it was no. For me, I was just like, nah. Like, I miss enjoying things. I miss the joy of life. But is being an anime girl better? It's much better. That's the thing, is like, when I discovered VTubers, it gave me the same, like, emotional juice that I got when I first started working in games. Mods need coffee. I'll end soon, I swear! I'm sorry. But yeah, discovering VTubers gave me the same, like, emotional juice as I got when I first started working in games, when everything was still, like, fresh and new and exciting, and, like, I didn't see people acting like garbage yet, and I hadn't been, like, worn down by the hours or anything like that. I was just like, this is amazing! I get to watch a dog girl play retro games and holler, and she's just having a good time. And the best part about this is she's a dog girl, and like it's just like pure wonderful retro game glory, because she's a dog girl who's doing it because she loves it. And so like I got the same, I was like, oh, this is something that people are doing because they love it. And so it gave me the same like rush of like, oh, this is something that people do out of love. And I really haven't lost that with VTubing yet, honestly. Like, sometimes I get a little stressed just because like my real life schedule is so hectic that I'm like, oh, I'm worried that I'm not streaming enough and I'm not doing enough things because my real life is crazy. But like, but at the same time, like just the love of doing it, the love of doing the thing is still like there for me. When OBS falls apart on you for the 100th time, I mean, I'm used to that by this point. And I mean, in part it's just because I feel like I found like a lot of the VTubers who I follow and who I watch are just like really cool, and so that helps, because that's the other thing, is like when you're working, you're not allowed to like pick your coworkers, so you can wind up with some real nasty, some nasty characters. But in VTubing, like, you can pick who you like, you can pick who you follow, you can pick who you collab with, you can pick who you interact with. And every time a VTuber who I think is really cool, like, reaches out to me or follows me or something like that, it gives me so much brain juice that I'm like, oh, and like, if there's any VTuber who I'm like, I'm not interested in this, or like, you know, I don't like their vibe, I simply don't have to interact with them. It's so easy. It's like cheating. And so it's all of the brain juice that I got initially from working on games without any of the negatives, other than occasionally being stressed about not being able to stream enough. But that's really it. I honestly I'm just having a good time. The fuck is your wall? Wait, you mean this? That's my Sega Saturn. Bacha Stick Pro. Sorry. I also have my Koronedaki on top of it. because I met to drape my Coruscant Daki on top of it, and then I forgot because I was so panicked about getting the stream up and running. Weird wallpaper, but go off, I guess. Sorry, that's what this was. I was like, I should have a background. Like, I was thinking about it, like as I was setting up, I was like, I need something in the background so it's not just like my window or whatever. And I was like, what's big enough to like be in the background of my stream? And then I was like, oh, I think my Sega Saturn Bacha Stick Pro is big enough. So I'll simply put that up. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out. Sorry that I'm drunk and rambling, but it was fun. I hope you got an insight into my toxic video game opinions. But I'm gonna go drink a bunch of water and go to bed so I can be up for my meeting in the morning. But have a good night or good morning or good afternoon or whatever it is wherever you are in Otsu drunk Otsumus.